look at the size of this thing.
Perfect. Awesome. So let's talk a little bit. So welcome here, Tony.
It's good to be here. Super good to be here.
Thanks for being on the show today. So right. Okay. We are back on the Hunter Apprentice podcast today, and I'm really excited because we have a very special guest. Brian Norder is in the studio today, and we're going to be talking a little bit about his experience getting into hunting. He's a very new hunter, and I think today's podcast is going to be super mint. And before we get started, just like to thank Backcountry, Killing Sticks, and Hell's Half Acre Coffee. And they're a few of great sponsors that we have here within Pursue the Hunt and the Hunter Apprentice podcasts and such. So make sure you check those guys out. Okay, welcome, Brian.
Thanks for having me.
Are you excited?
I'm very excited. It's been a really interesting 6-8 months. Really, really interesting. So it's been good.
Yeah, it's so just full disclosure, you and I, we haven't known each other a super long time.
I'd say probably inside of a year.
Yeah,
likely.
I think that's accurate.
Yeah.
And then we've since done a lot of really cool, fun stuff.
Yeah, there's a friendship that I didn't really see coming as fast as it did, and now I'd say you're like definitely in the best friend realm for me. I don't want to throw that out there.
Whoa.
It might be a little soon.
Whoa.
But yeah, the way that things have transpired in the last 8 months have been really crazy.
Yeah. And our wives knew each other first.
Yeah.
Through Beachbody.
Yeah.
And that circle there. But okay, so I'll let them know a little bit what we're going to talk about.
Sure.
So Brian, like I mentioned, is a new hunter, and actually maybe wasn't necessarily the opposite way of hunting, but kind of in the vegan realm of things as well. So I want to kind of hand the mic over to you in a sense, and I want to hear your story about getting to today. Kind of give us a bit of a background on your perspective of hunting before this kind of last year transpired, eating meat, the whole thing. Like, just let us know.
Okay, well, just to roll it back. So like you said, I've never been fully against hunting.
Mm-hmm.
I always thought that I was, maybe not always, so let's dial it back even a little further. I spent almost 5 years being full vegan.
Okay.
To the point where I was uncomfortable buying leather gloves.
Oh, okay.
Now, that worked for me fully. Like, actually worked really, really well. And I'm the kind of person that questions everything.
Right.
So I try to question the things that I'm doing and the things that I'm seeing, things that I'm reading. And I went from being vegan to asking questions about what that means for my children, especially growing up.
Right.
I started reading studies that didn't necessarily support that view. So I started asking more questions. And it just rolled into the wrong people I felt were telling me to be vegan. So upon more research, I decided that maybe it wasn't a good fit for me.
Mm-hmm.
And then I met you shortly after that. No, actually, you were involved. You were actually fully involved in that. Seeing your lifestyle, seeing how you like appreciated the animals and things like that. And there's something that growing up, my mom always said. She would say,
right,
if you kill it, you have to eat it. And I kind of changed that into, if I want to eat it, I have to kill it, because then I'm fully involved in the process and I understand it, or at the very, very least, be able and willing to kill that animal.
Right.
When I first started talking to you about hunting, I had started eating things like eggs, a little bit of dairy again as well, and I noticed that my energy was a little better. It's not that it was bad, but I feel like the longevity on my diet wasn't there anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just listening to my body, and then I started talking to you about hunting, because as I stated, if I want to eat it, I have to kill it.
Right.
And yeah, and then I remember the first conversation I had about you specifically about hunting. I think you were telling me about the bear hunt you had with Carly,
Right. Yep.
and
Yeah. Last fall.
yeah,
Yep.
and I just thought, hey, maybe that's something that I could do,
Right.
Because I don't need to hunt eggs, so technically I think I'm okay there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, so I
Do
just
you eat eggs?
yeah, oh, I love eggs,
Okay.
love eggs.
So being vegan wasn't necessarily the fact that you hated meat, or
I think it was more of it was mostly driven by my wife.
okay.
Won't lie to you.
Yeah.
But then it became a thing of like I'm more righteous than you because I'm not willing. I don't value my life more than the animal that's being killed in order to eat it.
Right.
So it became a righteous thing. It
Okay.
evolved into a righteous thing.
Right. Right. Right.
Yeah, and I don't
Did
think
you
I was
ever view hunters as murderers?
no, I never ever did. But because of my, if you kill it, you have to eat it, and
Right.
I always figured the hunter is doing that, and the animal gets to live in the wild. An animal lives amazing days, and then it has one bad day.
Yeah.
Right, and that's
Right.
kind of how I looked
Yeah.
at it, and I thought that was okay, right? Whereas like factory farming, things like that,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
that's what really bothered me.
Yeah. No, I get that for sure. Like, I think, coming from like an animal rights movement type
Mhm.
of perspective, you know, um, a the factory farming often gets thrown in there for
Mhm.
sure,
Yep.
and then the argument of quote unquote trophy hunting, right?
Mm.
And um, the whole misconception around trophy hunting, and I'm not saying there aren't people out there that hunt for the horns, so to speak, but I mean, hunters do so much more. I was scrolling through Instagram, and I was kind of reading a bit of a thread argument back and forth of some person's post, and then this anti-hunter kind of started some crap on the thread and
Mhm.
jostling back and forth. And if you look at how much the hunters do for conservation for the animals, not just appreciate the animals, but organizations like the Wild Sheep Society and the BC Wildlife Federation and those types of organizations where they put that money into protecting habitat or you know um, population counts, so that if they're finding that population numbers are getting low, they'll either put that area into a draw or a no hunting zone and things like that. So like without hunters, the contribution to conservation would be so minimal that um, it it would depopulate a lot of the animals and or encroach on very fragile ecosystems and stuff like that. So there has to be a balance in which most of the time, if you look at the contributors of why that balance is as good as it is, it's the hunters that are
Well,
actually huge contributors.
see, what's really funny about that is even as a vegan, I knew that I couldn't paint everybody with the same brush. So,
Hmm.
like trophy hunters, for example, everybody gets real mad when somebody goes and shoots a giraffe or something.
Right.
Well, I knew that that's the exception to the rule, right? I've always kind of known that,
Yeah.
right? So I didn't think that all hunters were just trophy hunters,
I've
right?
heard giraffe is really good to meat.
Well, and you might be right. I wouldn't know yet, but I think that's a bit of a misconception. I
Hmm.
was willfully ignorant to a lot of that stuff too, like with the
Yeah.
BC Wildlife Federation and things like that, and how they conserve animals and how
Well,
they monitor the populations.
but you look at how the stroke of the media's brush is,
Oh,
right?
for sure.
And I'm not going to get into the whole argument on people against like hunting lions or this or
Mhm.
that or the other, but I think it's all perspective
Mhm.
in a lot of it, and the media's perspective seems to be the one that trumps it a lot. And I've since starting Pursue the Hunt and talking to more producers that have traveled abroad, like New Zealand, Africa, and all over the world to hunt. um, it's the same mentality as here. Like, okay, so here we have mule deer and whitetail deer and elk and moose. Well, in Africa they have springbok and kudu and sable, and but it's the same. That's their deer and moose.
But they're exotic to us, so we feel like
Exactly. So it's like, well,
taboo.
why are you killing those animals, right? And I mean, we're kind of getting into a different topic of conversation with that, but I think the perspective of trophy hunting, like if you were to ask me my definition of trophy hunting, um, I can tell you every story of everything that I have on my wall.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And I think that to me is the trophy. That to me is the I'm getting some static here. Are you getting that static too?
Yeah, I wasn't sure if it was you or me. Well, I think it was me.
We'll just see. And you know, I've only ever shot one whitetail in my entire life. I've been hunting for 15 years, and we just don't have great populations of whitetail where I live, and lots of it's private land, etc. But I managed to harvest a whitetail in 2019, and was it 2019? Yeah, it was 2019, pre-COVID. And I tell you what, that thing barely broke 100. I think it was 115 inches.
Mm.
You know, like, but around here we don't grow a lot of big monster. I mean, we can, but we don't grow a lot of big monster whitetail in perspective to Alberta, Saskatchewan.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot remember an adrenaline dump that I had. It took me like 20 minutes just to calm myself down and get out of the tree stand so I wouldn't fall and like die because I was so jacked up because it was an animal that I've been really wanting to hunt and harvest.
Mm-hmm.
And not being able to eat a lot of whitetail meat, things like that. I was so pumped. And a lot of people might look at that and be like, oh, like you could have let it grow a little longer, whatever. But I mean, based on what we had on the trail cams, there was maybe one other buck that was bigger than that, and there was probably 8 different bucks on the trail camera, and that's just a selection we had to choose from.
Yeah.
And anyways, that to me is a trophy because of the story and the pursuit behind how that all came to a head for me to be able to harvest that animal.
For sure.
Right. That's for me, the trophy is the story. And I think for so many hunters, there's so much truth to that because I see lots of, influencer hunters on Instagram and things like that. And besides the fact, they're also great public speakers and they do lots of events and conservation stuff as well. But, they don't shoot just trophy animals all the time, like
Mm-hmm.
record book, when we call trophy record book animals. You even look at Meat Eater. A lot of his animals are making book, but you look at the adventures and the stories that they build and how it's about the meat, how it's about the animal, and it's about the experience.
For sure.
And I think that's really awesome how you transferred your mentality. Not that you were anti-hunter.
Yeah.
But how your reasoning for getting into hunting, I think, is the right one. And yeah, I haven't had a lot of conversations with people like, oh yeah, I got into it because all I want to do is kill the biggest thing in the world.
Yeah, no,
It's really not. The community is not about that.
Yeah.
And yeah, okay.
Yeah, I've learned a lot.
Mhm.
Talk about being a hunter's apprentice, man. I'm telling you, I couldn't have dove in any harder, I think. And
That is very fair.
and for me, like exactly like you said, it's not about going out and simply killing something.
Yeah.
Because as you'll find out later, I didn't.
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. But it's a lot about like what's involved in preparation and understanding what you're hunting, understanding the animal and with shot placement. And like there's so much more than just going out and putting a hole in something.
Right. Mhm.
And when you do drop something, that it's more than like that's just the beginning of the story. A lot of times, like you still have to process that animal, and there's a pile of learning there, which
Yeah.
I look forward to, and it's not just this savagery
Right.
event, which is I feel like is portrayed a lot from like an animal rights perspective. Like
Yeah.
I had to learn kind of the hard way that like when an animal is taken down in the wild, it's not pretty. Like it's not, they don't do it quickly necessarily. They don't like they either starve or they get sick and they die, or
Right.
they get attacked and taken down by something.
Yeah.
And all of those methods are worse than what a hunter does when done properly, especially.
I agree.
Right. So when people are looking at what hunters are, they're not evil. They're not mean, and there's always a purpose.
Yeah.
Right. There's exceptions to the rule.
Well,
but
like you say, the animals in the wild live this great life and then have one bad day.
one bad day.
Right. And even at that, you could say one bad split second in time. I mean, if you're hunting with a rifle and a bow, I mean, either or really, I mean, a lot of times the animal's dead before it hits ground,
Oh, for
right?
sure.
And I think that's such a great perspective and mentality that even us as hunters should not lose focus of
Mhm.
is um, we are in their environment, right? And I think that's what I've started gravitating more towards. Um, what's the word I'm looking for? I apologize for this weird static that is going on here. I don't know why it's being like this.
Well, something that I really noticed though, um, with hunters is that they're the most ethical people. Like conversations that we had, especially while like during our hunts,
Yeah,
where the conversation was, if you don't think you can take it down cleanly, if you're not comfortable, then don't take the shot.
that's right.
And and that to me was really surprising, and just like making sure that you're confident in what you're doing,
Yeah,
and that you're taking the shot that you feel is going to be the best method, um, rather than just, if you can see it, you shoot it, and then
carry on.
and carry on.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So
Was there anything that like leading up to before we actually went out hunting
yeah.
together? So like we'll call it the preparation before the hunt.
Mhm.
Was there anything that surprised you or maybe like frustrated you about the process?
I have learned that being a good shot is, there's a lot more involved. I honestly thought you just kind of point and shoot. Now I can't say I've shot a lot, but I've definitely shot enough to know what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but then getting like, for me, the frustration was getting dialed to shoot,
Right.
and then of course the entire time up to that, knowing that shooting a piece of paper or target is a lot different than actually shooting an animal, especially because it's a very controlled environment when you're practicing.
Yeah.
So I think nerves and practicing getting that dialed in for me was the most frustrating thing, anyways.
Yeah. And I think and especially for somebody new getting into it, that hasn't punched their first tag and has felt that adrenaline dump and has felt that that moment leading up to it. It's something that even my daughter, um, I told her time and time again. She had this thing. She's like, she's only 10, and she's, Dad, I'm not super comfortable with the gun yet. Like, could I try to shoot my first deer with the crossbow? And I'm like, yes, for sure you can. But I knew though that there is more margin for error with a crossbow,
Mhm.
but there's also margin for error with anything that you're just not comfortable with. So if she's not comfortable with a rifle, even though the impact of a bullet can be a lot more damaging if it's just slightly off where you're hoping it'll hit, um, if your pinpoint accuracy is better with the crossbow, ethical wise, I like the broadheads and the bows and the arrows, so clean,
Yeah.
right? Versus a bullet where you can damage meat if it's not placed improperly, things like that. And I don't have anything against rifle hunting. I'm still a rifle hunter, but between the two, um, there's definitely a purist aspect to bow hunting. Um, but the lethality of a broadhead, and like if anyone's cut themselves with like an X-Acto knife
Mhm.
or something very surgical, and how clean and how hard that thing is to stop bleeding, well, that animal is just, it's, and like I said, it's a dead man walking
So what's
kind of
funny?
thing.
What's funny about that to me is like we were talking about the misconceptions that I've had
Yeah.
about and I thought that bow hunting was exceptionally cruel, because now this person has to get even closer, and they got to be more personal with this thing, and you know
Right.
what I mean. And somehow that was more evil. And it's funny that that's also something that I've learned, um, is the cleanliness,
Right.
or the quickness of bow hunting in particular, where I agree with you. It is actually, especially a good bow hunter, is more ethical than shooting it.
An accurate bow hunter.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Because if you the worst feeling in the world is a bow hunter, and thank God, I'm just gonna knock on wood here that I have not experienced that, but to gut shot
Mm,
an animal with an arrow can be heartbreaking
for
as a
sure.
hunter, because like you got to back right out and hope that animal just beds down and
Mhm,
expires, and because there's often not a blood trail to follow and
mhm.
things like that too. So there you have to be proficient regardless of your weapon. You need to be proficient because that is how you are ethical,
Yeah.
right? And going back to the frustration of getting dialed in, oftentimes we put a lot of pressure on ourselves, right? And then we can start getting things like target panic and things like that, where we just need to like back away and say, hey, you know what? I'm just gonna enjoy the experience. I just gotta relax, you know, and oftentimes that's how it really comes together because I've tried to force hunting and it's not nearly as enjoyable. Oftentimes I've had way less success harvesting animals when trying to be pushy, where it's like, oh man, like I only have these few days, I just got to get her done.
Hmm.
You know, you're on their time clock. When you're in their environment, you're on their time clock. You like oftentimes I will see more game picking one spot where I know that there is animals out there, but picking one spot where I go out and I just sit
Just be patient.
and I'm just patient and something will walk through. Animals move around, but
Hmm.
at their own pace. You can't be like, okay, at this moment, please walk through this trail. The only time that ever works is if you have a bait pile and a tree stand and you've been rigorously patterning an animal.
Yeah.
And even at that, sometimes you have a dry day where literally nothing comes through there. So you gotta just like relax. It's like it'll happen when it's supposed to happen and how it's supposed to happen. And then you start becoming an outdoor enthusiast who also hunts.
Yeah.
And I really like that perspective because now that my kids are getting into hunting and my wife's able to come out and things like that, it's so much less about harvesting an animal now and more about just enjoying being out there with your family or your friends and learning stuff.
Yeah. Bro time.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what it became.
Or date night or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And like when Carly and I went out bear hunting, yeah, I had seen bears in a particular area the night before. And typically bears are patternable. Like when they find a good food source, they don't really move off it.
Hmm.
But I still knew realistically that it wasn't probably going to happen. And we would just go out and my daughter was babysitting and we were just going to have a great night outside,
Hmm.
you know? And then when that bear came out way later than I expected it to, and I was like, okay, well, we are losing light. So we if we are going to try to make this happen, need to be calculated and somewhat quick about it.
Hmm.
Um, but then the after effect, and then, my, my wife, she thought we were just strictly moose hunting. I'm like, no, we're hunting for whatever I have tags for is how it's going to happen. Right. And this was her first time ever coming out with me ever, like out hunting.
Oh.
And so she was a bit nervous because, there's a lot of misconception around bears. And I truly believe the more time you spend around bears, the less scared of them you'll be because they're fairly docile. They're shy. Unless you're threatening them or their offspring, they'll probably just take off. Like when I was in Saskatchewan and Manitoba last year, like same thing, right? Like we're literally sitting in a tree stand with 6 bears at the barrel
Mm.
beneath us. Not one of them was like, I'm gonna run up that tree stand and kill you. Their stomachs are definitely bigger than their eyeballs, right? And it's just such a cool way to watch behavior as well. Anyways, long story short, so we harvest this bear, and I go up to it, and I had to put a finishing shot on it. I made a good first shot, and the bear was going to expire, but by the time we got up to the bear, it's just if the animal's not expired, you don't necessarily have to wait for it to expire.
For sure.
You can just take care of it.
Hmm.
And so I did. And it's laying there. And a beautiful bear, beautiful coat. And for like, well, they always get nice coats in the fall, nice and greasy and fat, right? Oily. And I'm like, Carly, come and just feel this animal. Like it's such a it's like a blessing. And she's like, poke it in the eye first. You can't fake an eye poke. Because she wanted to make sure it was dead.
Yeah.
She's like, this thing could get up and kill us. I'm like, no, it's very dead. And so even as a very pro hunter as my wife is, but still not being able to just come out, there's still misconception, right, or misperception on certain species and stuff. So yeah, I don't know really where I was going with that, but I felt like I needed to share that story about just like the encompassing of hunting,
Yeah.
right? Like
Hmm.
what, like it's not just about putting a hole in something.
For
That's what
sure.
we were talking
Yeah.
about. And yeah, I like to rabbit trail sometimes. But okay, so let's go a little bit more into um so we're in November.
Yeah.
You finally get your core
I cannot
and
believe
your
how fast.
FWID so you can buy tags. And so we're getting ready to go hunting. So did you feel, because I didn't, obviously I'm not you, like did you feel like first day coming out, because I was like, hey, we're gonna go out in the truck, we're gonna spot deer, and then if there's anything legal, then we make a plan. Was there anything when you're driving out to my place to meet me where you where you felt like, what am I doing here?
So what really surprising, I surprised myself, is I didn't have any moment like that. So
Okay.
so I know, and it's really strange. I actively thought about this. I think a lot of it was I had connected with you,
Mm.
which you're a professional, right? L-
Mm.
If you want, we'll use the term loosely. You're a
Sure.
professional,
Yeah, yeah.
especially compared to me.
Yeah.
So I felt like I had somebody that I could trust,
Mm-hmm.
somebody that knew what was going on, somebody that knew what to do in the event where we were able to get something. So I wasn't like nervous or scared. I didn't. It was really really strange how calm I was. Like
Right.
right up until the end of my story, I was the way I described it to my wife was I felt like doctor calm.
Right,
I
right.
had
Like you were in the zone.
Yeah, I had no nerves. I was excited,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Yeah,
But I
yeah.
wasn't like shaky. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't like questioning myself. It was really really strange. Like a lot of things that I expected to experience, I I didn't go through the process that I expected.
Well, I mean, I'll speak maybe a bit on your behalf here and say I think that you were just really coming into it with an open mind.
100%.
You know, you weren't like, "Oh, I'm going to look for an excuse of why I knew I wouldn't like this," or and things like that. Because I I'm open to having any conversation with anybody who is either opposed to hunting or is curious about why we do what we do and things like that, as long as that person comes in with an open mind,
For sure. As long as they're willing to
right?
have a conversation.
If you're coming in to find an excuse to put me down or to be like, oh, I can confirm why this is stupid or why everybody's an animal murderer or whatever,
And they're not, yeah, a
right?
person fishing for a reason to attack you.
Exactly.
Because, yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
And I think I haven't personally experienced that, which I'm thankful for and stuff, but I would just encourage that if there is anybody listening or watching that if you have questions, like any hunter would love to sit down and have a cordial conversation with someone who is either against hunting or just really wants to understand the reasons behind it. Like, but we don't want to just be taken out of context and then that person is telling everybody else, oh, well, this guy said this and that's why I can confirm that this is stupid or whatever, right? Like, so often we get taken out of context,
Yeah.
and I think this is so great you sharing your story because it is completely out of technically a non-hunter coming into hunting context,
Yeah.
and sharing that perspective is such a gap bridger between the two.
Hmm.
And I think that's just so great. Okay, so first day we're going out, we're scouting deer.
Yeah.
And so full disclosure, did we hunt four days or
We
three?
we hunted 4 times
Four
in
times.
3 days.
4 times in 3 days, right?
Yeah.
Because we did do a morning, evening, the one
That's
day.
right. Yeah, yeah.
And I can tell you, honestly, from a person who's been hunting the better part of pretty much 16 years, that the amount of action and activity we had in the middle of mule deer rut in northern BC, I have never experienced before in my life. Like, I could not believe, the amount of deer, the different deer
Yep.
that we
And
saw
we even saw
in
whitetail.
different locations
Yeah.
and whitetail, but the amount of bucks chasing does, the amount of bucks fighting it off, like it was unreal from my perspective. It was like, oh my gosh, like like, I don't even know what Brian is thinking right now, because I hope he doesn't think that this is how it is, how it is all the time,
The
because
worst
it was
part,
insane.
the worst part was that was almost exactly what I thought. I was like, oh, I can't imagine what it must be like to be spoiled if this is what hunting is. And that was kind of a blessing in disguise, because when you hurt your leg, right? I'm like, before you hurt your leg, I was like fully expecting to be out there just hoofing it, and then you had you buggered up your leg, and
Yeah.
it turned into a bit more of a trucking hunt experience, and I was grateful for that because she was chilly there a
It
couple
was
days.
chilly a couple days, yeah.
But yeah, and the amount of animals that we saw was crazy to me.
It was
But being
mind-blowing.
that it was the first couple of times I'd been out, I was like, this is like normal, right? Like this is what everybody
Yeah.
experiences. And then you were expressing like how crazy it was, and I was like, oh, maybe I should be a little more grateful and like understand that this is in fact the exception to the rule, and I just happened to luck out and get into this right during the rut.
Well,
And
what you experienced was exactly that. You experienced peak rut.
yeah, the
Like,
stars aligned for
if
me.
there was any moment in time for anybody to experience what actual rut is, looks like, feels like, that was literally it. And you know what? It was a little bit later in the month than I had anticipated as well.
Yeah.
How long rut went, but we had a late fall,
hmm
and there wasn't a lot of snow cover. We had rain and dry spells at weird times of the year, which
Yeah.
allowed a lot of regrowth from harvested crops. So there was feed everywhere. So basically, like I had said before when we went out, I'd said, we're not hunting the bucks, we're hunting the does.
That's right.
Even though we can't shoot a doe, you hunt and pursue the does
Yeah.
because the bucks show up. And
That couldn't have been more true.
right. And I felt really cool about myself, because I was
Yeah.
like, man, this is working out like
Yeah.
exactly how I envisioned it. Right. And I think, okay, so I'm just trying to replay it. Did we did, I think we made a stalk on a deer every day that we did go out.
Yeah, every day.
Every day we made a stalk.
No, not even every day. It was every time we had gone out, because we went out, again.
Because that tour
That's
day,
right.
we did actually make 2 stalks. The one in the morning.
Yeah.
That was the one.
Well, hold on.
Okay,
Let's go day one.
You go.
Okay.
You go. Start day one.
We're trucking around, and we were stalking. What do? We went to a couple different places, and we kind of struck out, and we'd seen that other people that had been there, and we figured if anything was here, it's likely gone now, anyways.
Yeah.
So we contacted a couple people that you knew personally, and we were like just making sure that we were okay to hunt on their land.
Yeah.
And we had spotted a bunch. I can't remember how many does, but we spotted a couple of does, and we were just kind of stalking, just waiting, and exactly like you said, almost like you'd seen the future. A buck had come out, and we were walking down the windrow, and we're just like just trying to be quiet and trying to be chill, and it's really interesting how many things you have to pay attention to, because you're specifically, I remember things you said, like they'll see you, they got excellent eyesight.
Yeah, they look for movement.
But they don't seem to mind if they see you so much as if they wind you, if they smell you. So being just almost hypersensitive to things like wind direction and like just body position, and making sure that when you do find a place, you're comfortable, because you don't know how long you're going to be there, and then when you finally see the buck, you're like, now you got to decide whether it's legal or not. And thank goodness you were there, because
it's harder to count points than you think.
Yeah, for sure, especially
when they're on the trees.
Yeah. Okay. So again, I had my expert, and without my expert, I don't know if I would have even had what I would consider to be a good opportunity. And the first day we went out, I remember when we fought, we spotted one. It was just kind of over the hill. We were waiting for him to circle back, and obviously he's chasing does, and he's doing buck things, right? And it was a little too far away.
Right.
I remember the first day it was a little too far. I think we what did we range it? 280, 290?
Yeah, it was over 250.
Yeah, and for a proficient hunter, that would be a relatively easy shot. But as I stated, leading up to the hunt,
we were trying to keep it 150 and under.
Yeah, like I would probably be comfortable poking it at about 200, but even then, for me at the time, especially even now, right, as I continue to practice, I don't think that I could make an ethical shot, right? And that's the conversation we had when we had that one in the sights on the first day. Yeah, we were gauging it. I remember we said it was about I want to say 2.
Because you were standing, resting on a branch.
Yeah, and it was a great spot to be standing.
Yeah,
I was nice and steady. I was calm, and that's what, like I was saying.
Yeah,
I was calm.
Yeah.
I felt no jitters, no nothing.
Yeah.
And it was just too far away. And you said, well, do you want to take the shot? And I was like, well, I better not.
Yeah.
And then I remember, so you went down the tree line or the windrow.
Yeah, I went up the other side and around.
That's right. And I remember you telling me, you're like, I come around this tree and they were like right there.
Oh,
Like,
dude,
if I had a
like
bow.
it was so frustrating for me because I'm kind of like your guide in a sense, right? And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go around and
Chase them out, essentially.
yeah, kind of push them out into the field because they were kind of just tucked inside the trees, and I knew that there was a gap in the trees that they were probably bedded in.
Yeah.
And they were out of our line of sight. We couldn't really get any closer without possibly being spotted or winded because there was probably 15 deer in total in the area.
Absolutely.
So there's too many eyeballs to just keep going down the windrow that
Yeah.
we were. So I went up the other side of the windrow because it was probably a 50-yard wide windrow, right? So I go up to the other side, going down, and I literally get to the edge of where the clearing is in the trees.
Yep.
And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, I'm thinking, okay, like, do I go back and get Brian? Like, I don't know what to do here because he was literally like within bow range and they hadn't even seen me. And I was like, this can't be happening. Right. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to go back and get Brian. So as I turned, a doe that I didn't see just locked me. And I was like, okay. So I just like, I crouched down for a second thinking that she'd be like, oh, it must have been another deer, and then go back to feeding. And then I could like crawl my way out of there. And that's ended up not what happening. And then they blew out completely the opposite way of you.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my gosh, I think I know I just ruined a mint opportunity. It was like, what, 10 in the morning? We had all day.
It was so, oh yeah.
Oh man,
And
it was just like you couldn't have asked for a better hunting day.
The funny part was that was, I think, was that the first day or was that the second day?
No, that was the first day.
Yeah, so it was pretty chilly the first day. So I was
That's
like,
right. It
I
was
like,
a little chilly.
I was like secretly like, no, that's totally fine because I'm kind of cold, and I was kind of being a Nancy about it, right? And when you come back and you told me that it was so close, I was like, oh, I was like happy, but I was like shoot, but also kind of secretly happy.
If you were literally with me, it was a slam dunk.
Oh
It
man,
was 100% slam dunk.
so I'm a little salty about that. What are you gonna do, right?
It's hunting.
So, but it was almost like the same story on the second day we went out too,
Yeah.
though, right?
On the same field.
On the same field,
On the same field.
likely with the same buck,
Yep.
like,
Yeah.
and same thing. So it was just too far away. It was too
Yeah.
far away for me to poke it, right?
Yeah.
So then trying to make a plan. Like, okay, so last time I didn't go with you. Like, should I move with you this time? And I remember we decided this time we wouldn't. We stood in the bush for I don't know how long. It felt like 7 hours. Of course,
Yeah.
it wasn't. And then that doe kept circling. And
Yeah,
we thought,
yeah.
how is she not winding us?
Yeah.
And we were hoping that her activity down would drive the other does down,
Yeah, that's
which
right.
would bring the buck along.
Yeah.
And she didn't. She just circled, and she definitely smelled us. I remember she
did, but she didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
And she couldn't see us. And she definitely wasn't the lead doe because like a lead doe would have just snort wheezed and told the entire universe where we were and away they go.
Yeah.
Like they do that for elk and deer. There's just I wish we could just shoot does and bucks at the same time because you take out the lead and then nobody else knows what the heck they're doing. And I've heard that with bison too. Like if you have like any sex tag where you can shoot cows and bulls, if someone takes out that lead cow, the whole herd just stands there and goes, what are we doing? Where are we going? Because they don't know.
They just lock
Right?
up. They don't,
They lock up.
No direction.
Yeah, 100%. So, no, that was definitely a unique situation, and it's almost the same spot exactly where Carly and I, when we were hunting for her deer earlier that fall, it would have been, you know what? I probably was right at the beginning of November. Actually, it still felt like fall because we had such a late fall.
Yeah,
because you and I didn't start hunting really until the middle to end of November because we were waiting for your license.
that's right.
Yeah. So it was early November, and basically same spot on the same windrow. And we had a same encounter with a doe. She actually walked 5 yards in front of us, but the wind was in our face.
Yeah.
So she didn't smell us or see us. So that was a cool encounter. Okay. So if we go let's go to the last day.
Day 3.
Day 3.
Day 3.
So in the morning,
Yeah.
we were driving out to that same field, and I said, you know what, let's just, I'd seen some deer feeding, so we set up the spotting scope.
Yeah.
And then we spotted the deer just over the fence in that horse pasture.
That's right. Oh, that's right.
Remember? And we're like, oh, let's just wait to see if he comes back around. And then he kind of buggered off in the trees.
Yeah.
And then I was like, okay, let's drive up to that other guy's farmyard.
Yeah, right where the
Park.
silos were.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then see, well, no joke, what happened next.
Well, okay, so that's right. There's the 3 does on the top of that field.
Yeah.
So we were kind of in the midsection.
Yeah.
And when we come up, that's exactly what we said. We said, we'll go up to where those 3 does are.
Yeah.
If that buck catches wind of them or notices them, he's going to drive that doe up.
Come check him out.
Yeah. And so we got up there. I remember we were waiting. It was maybe 15, 20 minutes, not long.
Yeah.
And all 3 of those does' heads just snapped like they had heard something.
You look at there and you're like, oh, something's coming.
And you could gauge roughly where that buck was just by the position of their head, how they were looking.
Yeah.
So I remember you're like, get your gun, let's go. And try to be quiet, and also like, now you're getting excited, right?
Yeah.
So we get out, and I remember setting up the bipod in front of the truck. And when the doe had finally come, so obviously the buck was following the doe, she was in front of him. So if I was going to take a shot at that buck, I basically would have been able to shoot him in the butt.
Yeah,
so obviously
the doe was kind of barriering.
That's right.
The buck. Yeah.
So and they were, I don't know if they're 50 yards away.
To start with, they kind of angled away.
Yeah.
But it was a slam dunk shot.
So then as they moved around the front of us, the doe went on top of this berm and the buck went kind of behind it.
Yeah.
And then when you emerged from the berm itself, there was so much foliage. I was like, I don't know if I want to take the shot. It doesn't take much to ricochet a bullet, right?
Yeah.
So you're like, grab your gun, grab the bipod. And we ran to the other side of the silo. And you're like, as soon as he comes out, he says, they're going to come out. Because I know there's another berm and then there's a fence. So we knew that they're going to kind of be in between. And I remember setting up and you're like, bro, don't panic. But there's a moose bedded down, like right beside us.
Yeah.
And I just remember thinking,
I literally remember seeing this black thing beside us. And I was like, there's a moose.
Yeah. I remember the tone. It wasn't like, oh, hey, there's a moose. It was like, dude, there's a moose right beside us. And I'm like, oh, great. One of 2 things is going to happen. I'm going to try to shoot this thing and I'm going to get wounded, but then I'm going to scare this moose and we're going to get trampled. Or this thing's going to stand up and he's going to ruin our day. He's going to ruin our day. That's exactly what I thought.
See, and I guess that was probably my bad because I was like in literally no point worried about the moose.
Well,
because I was like,
I didn't have eyes on it.
More or less, I was worried that he was going to, or that moose, I don't think it was a bull. I think it was a calf. Like a 2-year-old calf, but I was afraid it was gonna just bolt and then
give us away,
right? Because that doe was still with that buck, and you always have to worry about the does because they're always on the alert.
Yeah.
Because the buck, he's only worried about one thing, right?
One thing,
and so after I said that, so then the doe comes out, then the buck is coming out, and I'm like.
So,
oh my gosh, this is going to happen.
So the way it worked out, so because of the way the berm and the fence was, if the buck came and just was like his chest was aligned with the fence, I would maybe be able to get a shot on him.
Yeah,
because the way the berm was.
Yeah, that's right.
So as soon as that doe came out, you could tell she winded us because her head snapped, looked right at us, and then she immediately followed the fence line and then was walking away from us. Well, the buck didn't take 2 seconds as he was walking out, and he just followed her. He knew something was up. And I remember after, because I'm a professional hunter now.
Yeah.
Specifically mule deers, you can they're curious. So you try to make some noise or whatever, you can get their attention, they'll stop for a brief second, you get an opportunity. I remember you were yelling.
Dude, I was up waving my arms, yelling at this buck.
And they were not interested. And I had 1 or 2 options. Either I could try to shoot a moving target and I was going to have to be from the rear. And I didn't want to do that.
It was quartering away, which is
even more
not great.
It was more than it
was angled away pretty hard.
Pretty hard.
That's by the time he angled more broadside to us, he was like 300
exactly
plus.
So same position. So I made sad adult noises again. We packed up our stuff, kind of licked our wounds, and I remember you said, "I got a couple things I got to do. I need a daylight for." He says, "So why don't you go home?" Because it was early, like you said, it was early.
Yeah, it was like 10. It was before 10 o'clock, and I hated to wind it up, but because that buck had jumped the fence, so we couldn't even hunt on that property.
Yeah.
I was like, man, he's gonna go bed there, but he's probably gonna come back out on this field and feed later.
Yeah.
So we kind of pressed the pause button.
Yeah.
And then we came back that afternoon.
Oh my goodness. So naturally I was late again, right? Because I like to run down the clock as hard as I can.
Yeah, like the 11th hour.
So I remember we were actually at the same. I don't know if it was the exact same field, but I think it was the same
It
field.
was the same field, but the windrow down.
That's right.
Different windrow.
As the first 2 days.
Yeah.
So we were walking, and remember that tree? It was the craziest tree. It was a big, heavy trunk tree, and it had like a canopy, this big tent.
Yeah.
And I remember we were sitting there, and you could see it on the left side of the windrow. There was a pile of deer, and on the right side there was a pile of deer. And we're trying to. It was starting to get dark at this point. I remember it was.
Yeah, the sun was going down
That's
pretty
right.
hard.
So I remember specifically, sunset was 4:27 that day. We live pretty far north. So, and you can only shoot 1 hour after that.
Yeah.
And I remember we were walking down the windrow, and I remember looking at my clock, thinking like, "Oh man, if this is gonna happen, it's gonna happen fast, and it's got to happen. It's gonna happen.
It's
soon.
gonna have to happen."
So we found that tree, and we're like, "This is perfect."
Yeah.
And we were kind of, the wind wasn't ideal. It was at our back pretty hard.
Yeah.
But I remember we're sitting there, and I was looking right, and Mike, you were sitting right as well. You were kneeled down just at the edge of the tent.
Yeah.
And then I remember hearing this noise, and I couldn't nail it. I'm like, "What is that?" It sounded like running, like
stampeding.
A National Geographic helicopter shot where they cue in the stampede sound.
Yeah.
And just as I looked to my left, there was 3 does and a monster body buck. They run 6 feet in front of us.
Oh, well, the one almost hit me.
Yeah.
Because I was coming back into the canopy, because remember, I was on the right side of the windrow looking, because there was one buck that I was trying to just count points on in there. And as I was making my way back underneath the canopy, I caught them out of like the corner, literally the corner of my eye. And I actually, like my instinct, they were so close that I instinctually like fell backwards.
Yeah.
Because I thought the buck's horns, like antlers, were going to like tear me up. And that's how hard and fast these things were coming. They did not see us, smell us, or even turn back towards us.
So they run past us, and we just look at each other. We're like,
did that just happen?
No way.
Yeah.
They didn't wind us. No way. But they didn't care. They were flirting and running and carrying around. And I'm like, what is going on right now? I'm like,
of course, I don't have my camera with me.
I'm like, I can't imagine what a good hunting experience is like then, because this is normal. Remember, this is normal for me.
Yeah, no, being run over by rutting deer is not normal.
So I remember now our attention, of course, is up to the right, right?
Yeah.
Watching. We ended up counting him. He was a really nice buck, really big body.
But he was thick. He didn't make the fourth.
He wasn't legal. So I'm like, oh, of course, right?
Yeah.
So I remember looking, and now we've got, I can't remember, it was like maybe 20 minutes before shooting was over.
Yeah, it was getting dark.
And I looked to my left again, finally, after I realized, okay, well, he's no good, even though that was an amazing experience.
Yeah.
And I'm like, Mike, I'm sure there's one more over there.
Yeah,
I remember, I'm like, I'm sure. I'm like, it's pretty dark.
We should stay till dark because the big ones come out at last light.
So you pull out I remember we forgot spotting scope too, remember?
Yeah.
We just had the binos. So it was a little extra, one more little tally on the make it complicated. I just remember it looking over, and so you grab the binos and you're like, dude, that's the same guy that got away from us this morning.
And like I kid you not, like I don't think we would have been able to wrap our middle finger and thumb around his base.
He was a big boy.
He was a huge buck, and the thought I was like, oh my gosh, if Brian shoots this thing, he's gonna be so disappointed for years to come, because this thing he was a tank. Like he was heavy all the way to the tips. He was the kahuna.
He was the big daddy.
Yeah. Like I could even just tell from his neck that I'm like I'm getting goosebumps right now.
Yeah.
Because I was so excited. And then, but I remember we couldn't get you in a really great shooting position.
So this was my fault. Okay. I knew that we were run out of time.
Yep.
I knew that this was the last possible day that I could. It was Sunday.
Yeah.
Muleys for me closed on Tuesday, and I was booked for work, like my quote unquote my regular job.
Yeah.
Monday and Tuesday. So it was getting dark. It was my last chance. It was a big boy. There was all these things were running through my head. Now, remember I told you I didn't feel nothing. I was calm. Calm, like the calmest water you ever seen.
As a cucumber.
And I was good, and it was fine.
Yeah.
And then, okay, this is my last chance. So now I'm getting my head.
Yeah.
Well, the first branch I saw was a little low. So I was in this half squatted position, right? And the wind was gnarly. Like it was super, super windy. It
Yeah.
was like, so it was blowing right in our face now, which was great for us.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Obviously.
So I remember looking through the scope and my eyes watering
Yeah.
like I just got poked in the eye.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
was
yeah.
like literally tears were running down
Yep.
my face. I'm trying to wipe it away, and I'm trying to get on this buck. So now because I'm nervous, I'm in this half squat position. I'm having a hard time. It's 110 yards away,
If that.
and I can't find it in my scope because
Yeah.
it's to the point where like it's almost
starting
too
to
dark.
get too dark.
Yeah. So finally, I get it in my scope, and the only time I could actively see where to shoot it
Yeah.
was when he took a step with his front
Yeah.
leg.
Yeah. And
So I
open
could
it
see
up.
that's so I could see the crease,
Yeah.
right? And I'm thinking, holy smokes! And he was quartered away, and it was really, really dark, or it was getting dark.
Yeah.
And I've now learned the importance of good optics.
Yeah.
And a good scope,
Yeah.
because
100%.
I think that really hurt me. It was
just wasn't letting
was-
enough light in.
it was darker through the scope than just looking at the animal
Right.
with the natural eye.
Yeah. Because I'm looking at this going, okay, Brian, he's going to turn. And then he turns. I'm like, okay, shoot. And you're like, I can't see him. I'm like, he's right there. And like in all seriousness, it wasn't too dark to shoot. Like we're not shooting
No,
in illegal
absolutely
light
not.
or anything.
No.
But I was like, why isn't he shooting?
So
He's
okay,
right there.
so
Shoot.
So now here's Brian. Okay, standing half
crouched.
squat, half crouched on this branch, really windy, eyes watering, the whole thing's going on, and now I get the jitters.
Yeah. Now you
Of
start getting buck fever.
All times, and I think I just got it in my own head. I
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
did,
Yeah.
because I'm like, you got to take a shot, Brian. This is your last chance.
Yeah. You're
And
trying to rush it.
I remember my head was going bananas. It was
Yeah.
going so 100 miles an hour.
Yeah.
I'm like, bro, I can't calm down.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
The buck took up the entirety of my scope.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I didn't have it all the way dialed up. It's not even
Yeah.
not a real powerful scope.
Yeah.
That's how close he was.
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I remember having the sights on him, and he was quartered away a little bit, but not too bad. It was a good shot.
Yeah.
And I was shaking so much between my legs and the half squat position that I was holding, and now the nerves are kicking in.
Yeah.
And I can't see him all. It looks like the lens is fogged up because I'm got so much water in my eyes from the wind, and
Yeah.
I'm all over the place. I remember I was moving so much, even at 100 yards, that it was going from his rear, like from his butt,
Yeah.
to past the front of his chest. And
Yeah,
I was
that's
just
a lot of movement.
I was like-
That's like 5 feet of movement if you think of how long a deer is.
That's right. So I
Yeah.
was like, well, I'm not going to just like hopefully time the swing and pull the trigger.
No.
Right.
No.
So I was like, bro, I can't calm down. And you're like, take a step back, relax, find another branch. And that's exactly what I did. Now, if
Yeah.
I had just found
That branch
just
sooner.
2 seconds more, if I had just, because I was excited, right?
Yeah.
I know sooner I get the sights on, sooner I can get this thing down, the sooner we can go.
Yeah.
So I rushed it. So I got up on the branch again, and I got him in my sights again. Now he's fully away from me.
Yeah.
Fully turned
And
away.
going into the trees on the
And
other windrow.
I'm like, come on, man, like turn.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I remember thinking, would we be able to physically make enough noise to even get his attention now because it's so windy?
Yeah, that's right. That's
Right.
right.
And I didn't think we could personally. So he just nonchalant, had no idea we were there, just doop 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 like a freaking jerk. Goes into the bush. And Mike's like, bro, we have 10 minutes.
We got to run.
We have 10. So we're running, of course.
We run across the field. We blow out the rest of the deer.
We don't care.
And I'm like, they're going the right way that we need them to go. Like, just keep going.
But see, the problem I did, so I'm an apprentice. Okay. Remember this. These are important notes for when we're talking specifically about me going hunting, because
That's right.
I don't know any better.
Right.
When I went home between our morning hunt and our now late afternoon hunt,
Yeah.
I did my workout.
Yeah.
Right? I try to stay fit, try to do this.
Sure.
Well, it was leg day.
Absolutely.
Well, I don't skip leg day.
No.
I try not to anyways.
No chicken legs.
That was a problem.
Mm.
That was problematic because we weren't running far. Again,
No.
the deer was only,
And I've got a braced up knee. So
and that's right.
I'm not running full tilt.
No, I could barely keep up to you. Now I had this big adrenaline dump and all this
Yeah,
other
yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
But my legs were like, bro.
They felt like
What are
1,000
you-
pounds.
So I'm like running, and we get to the next windrow, and we're looking, trying to find this guy. We're like, this is it, man. Like if there was an it, this was
This
that.
was it.
I'm like, man.
Please be there.
I'm like so sad, right? Because I'm like,
Yeah.
I feel like I'm done.
yeah.
And we're looking. Finally, I see him, and I'm looking. I'm like, where? Like I don't see him.
Like at the highway.
Yeah, he's like, bro, he's jumping the highway. And I remember
Like he made it all the way across that field.
the highest high of hunting
Yeah.
to like this moment of realization, this sinking feeling, like
That's it.
that's it.
That's it.
That's it. I was so sad.
Yeah.
And I was like so grateful. It was like this really weird like mix of things that was going on, because I'm like, this has been incredible.
Yeah.
Like I feel like I've grown so much with the help of you, of course, in like my perspective of hunting and like my understanding of like tracking animals and
Mhm.
understanding weather patterns. I remember we had hours of conversation
Yeah.
just on how animals move and trying to predict what they're going to do the next day based on the weather from the previous night,
Right.
or the barometric pressure. I remember specifically we talked about that. I learned so much. I was like just like reflecting on all these things I learned in the moment,
Yeah.
and
It's all calculation.
I was like, I had to take a moment where I was like, am I going to be sad or am I going to be happy about this?
Yeah, that's right.
And I definitely took some time to be sad, because that night I remember getting in my truck and I just went like this. I started my truck and I just went. And I remember the speed limit was 90.
Yeah.
Okay. I drove 85 the entire way home with no radio on and just sat in my sadness. I was so salty.
It was partial grieving.
Well, and the worst part was we got back and I was like coming into the house. I took a little moment. In the house, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And you're like giving everybody like a heads up, like, don't be too hard on them, right? We didn't get nothing. And I come in, right? And I do a little self-deprecating, right? Because like I'm a jokester.
Yeah.
Right. And I was like, oh, looks like Amanda's gonna have to introduce me as her. Hey, this is my husband Brian, the failed hunter Brian. And I'm like, oh man, like I'm gonna have to live with this for the next like
Forever
until next season.
But here's the thing. You telling this story now, how many hunters do you think are going to benefit from this? And it's still it's like you encountered everything but actually harvesting the animal. Like literally. Like there are times, I'll be honest, where it almost seemed too easy. Like, and I mean, it's like, oh, well, that's a good problem to have, Mike. But it's like, no, but for real, like, there are times, like, well before the show, where Jeremy and I have gone out moose hunting. We always go out opening day. We take the day off.
Yep.
And we literally go out, like, 5:05 a.m. is shooting light, and we're there.
Yeah.
And I remember this one year, we were driving up to the spot. We didn't even get out of the truck. I was like, oh, there's the bull. And literally parked the truck and walked in and down the road, worked the wind, and we were like, I don't know, we were probably 400 or 500 meters from the pickup, like, and then shot the moose in the field opening day, and like we were pumped because like like freezer's full and blah blah blah. It's like that's literally the hunting story I have from that moose. Like that is literally beginning to end. Like my moose hunting season was over 3 minutes into opening light.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's sweet. And I'm super blessed and I'm super fortunate.
Mm-hmm.
But it was like, oh. Whereas on the opposite side, we had deer that almost literally ran us over.
So I try to get a little bit of perspective, right? I think to myself, we went out 3 days, 4 times, and I had a legal buck in my scope virtually every time we went out. Now, I ran into my own personal problems, whether it's just shooting skill, right? Which of course I can iron out as I continue to shoot, too far away,
mm-hmm.
or just we get winded, or like I had something in my sights every time.
Yeah,
and I don't want it to sound like an excuse, but like it was like the perfect opportunity, but
mm-hmm.
not the perfect opportunity
for
me as a new hunter.
Right.
And
what's the one thing I told you though? After every one of those opportunities where you're like, oh, I could see the frustration building. What did I say though?
Well, I remember specifically you're saying not taking a shot that, how did you word it?
You'll never regret a shot you didn't take.
Exactly. Okay. Yeah. There you go. I remember we had a lot of conversations specifically about being ready, not necessarily ready to shoot, but being confident in the shot.
That's right.
And I know I specifically said, you're like, I would rather you not take the shot because you're either not ready, you're not comfortable, you decide that maybe this isn't a good time, or for whatever. There's no wrong reason, but by not taking the shot is actually better if you're not either mentally or ready, essentially, then taking a shot that isn't ideal, I guess.
Yeah, like it sucks in the moment.
Yeah.
Like that last day, last light, there he was, monster
Oh,
buck, like
man.
wall hanger buck. But at the
How you gotta
same
call it?
time,
You gotta call it wall hanger, huh? You gotta do that.
I would have mounted that thing if I would have shot it.
Man.
But you know, the thing of it though is like, yeah, okay, you relive that story, whatever, and you take away what you learned from it. But like the regret fades away. But had you taken that shot and you're like, and you weren't confident seeing it in your scope, because like you said, it was darker in the scope than it was outside, blah, blah, blah.
No.
You gut shot that thing. It runs across the field. It hops the highway. Now it's on a different piece of property. We got to track down the farmer. We got to track down a wounded buck. We never find the buck, perhaps. That thing lives for another week before it dies of sepsis.
Yeah,
Blah, blah, blah. That sucks way more
for sure.
than not taking the shot, and you'll have an opportunity next time.
It'll be
And then
bigger
when
next
you
year.
take that opportunity and that buck's on the ground and you walk up to that buck for the first time, you won't even care about any of those other times. You won't.
Mhm.
Because it all the learned experiences, everything is up to that moment.
Yeah.
Where you're like, I actually did everything right, and this is what happened. You know, that's the same thing with Isla. You know, she's only 10. I could have set up the bait site and the blind and the trail cameras and checked them all myself and set everything up. Just made sure she was practicing her crossbow shooting. We would have gone into the blind opening day and shot the deer. She learns nothing from that.
Yeah.
Other than, you know, how to be fairly proficient with a crossbow.
Mhm.
That's it. But I said, if this is your deer, you're involved in the whole process.
100%.
You know, she was out there with me on the skid steer, you know, opening up the area, putting the grain out, setting up the trail cam, checking the trail cam, and, you know, sitting in the blind on days we didn't see anything for 6 hours, you know, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is boring, whatever. I'm like, well, you're learning patience, aren't you? You know, and then when that moment came and she plugged that deer at 18 yards with that crossbow, and she made an incredible, like that deer traveled 15 yards before tipping over. She was like, I know what you mean now. Right. And then walking up to it, and she was like, oh my goodness. Like, you could see it in her eyes kind of got big, and kind of like, I think it was a self-realization moment for her that it was like, okay, hard work does pay off.
For sure.
And we worked hard for 3 days and we had opportunities, but honestly, sometimes it's hard hunting in peak rut because they don't sit still.
Yeah.
Like they just, they're trying to breed multiple does, chasing off multiple other bucks, trying to be the kingpin, getting in a bite of food here and there so they don't die. Their brain is just so all over the map, you know, and you know, if you hunt them pre-rut, you know, right early November, sometimes it's a little bit easier because they're just getting into the mood and they're maybe still in bachelor groups, or you hit them up post-rut, right? But rut went right to the end of November, so we couldn't even hunt them post-rut because like rut literally took us to the end of the hunting
It was
season.
so late.
It was late rut, and I
Yeah.
think it's because we had such an extended fall.
Yeah.
But it's just man, like going from year 1 for Brian,
Yeah.
and year like 15/16 for Mike. I would do that experience 100 times out of 100 and not shoot a single deer than have another moose story like that one. Because for me, it's just so much about everything other than pulling the trigger now. Like, and you'll realize that as you get out and hunt more, it's just like, it's the harvesting an animal is the cherry on top, and it makes it more thankful. You're so much more thankful. I mean, I'm thankful regardless of the story, but like getting more boots on the ground and having those experiences, and like, let's say you hunt all of November and then you shoot a buck on November 30th, and you literally hunted November 1st to November 30th. The amount that you learned in those 29 days leading up to the 30th day is far, far more valuable as you become in the longevity of hunting.
Yeah.
Right. Like, you don't really learn anything about moose hunting about going out there and like, oh, there's the bull. I mean, I scouted them, I patterned them before hunting season. I kind of knew where they were hanging out. But like that particular experience, we just played the wind and shot the moose. Great. I've learned how to play the wind. Okay, whatever. But it wasn't like we had to call the moose in, or that we had to push and we had to pack it out by hand and this and that and the other. Right. So the more times you go out hunting and don't shoot something, you become a better hunter, in my opinion. You don't become a better hunter by going out every single time and shooting stuff.
Well, you appreciate it more too.
100%.
Like when you put all that hard work into something, and then it finally pays off.
And by the way, he has shot something.
That's right. Oh, this isn't even the end of the story. That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
So fast forward to right before Christmas.
Yeah.
My wife and I, we grow turkeys. And my wife's like, man, we need to get rid of some of these toms. So I invite Brian over here with his incredibly awesome and amazing semi-automatic shotgun.
That's sweet. First time shooting it too.
And we set these tom turkeys free.
Okay, hold on.
Hold on.
Free. Can I tell you a little story? Okay, moving up to this, okay? I was working with this guy, okay? And I was telling him I was so excited to go on this turkey hunt, right? I was like, oh yeah, we're going to let him out. We're going to give him a bit of a head start maybe, and then we're going to hunt these turkeys. We're going to stalk them. And this is what I was expecting, right? And we get there. And it's a battle to get them away from the pen, because that's all they wanted to do was go back to pen. I'm like, oh my goodness. I'm like, this is so crazy. How... It wasn't a stalk.
No.
It was...
It was a free-range butchering session.
If you missed, it's my turn. That's what it was, because we're like, we got to get this done quick because they're trying to get back in the pen.
Yeah,
and it was funny.
But I just see, my wife, bless her heart, she has no issues with removing the heads of chickens and turkeys and other poultry that we raise.
Yeah,
and that's how most people butcher their turkeys and chickens, right? And they just got a chopping block and away you go. I don't know what it is about me, but I lose my Cheerios when I remove an animal's head without it dead yet. I have this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not against harvesting animals, clearly, but it's like, it's got to be dead first before I remove the head. It's a thing. And I mean, I know traditionally that's how you butcher poultry, and I agree with it.
It's fast.
I don't have an issue with it.
Yeah.
I just have an issue with me doing the act of decapitating poultry with an axe or a knife or anything sharp, because we do it ethically. It's quick. It's clean. My wife does it all the time, and that's just her realm of the farm. But it was way more fun to shoot the turkeys in the head. Let's be honest here.
Yeah. It was so
cold. And then I could remove the heads to let them bleed out. That wasn't the issue.
Mm-hmm.
But it was like, I have this in my head. And I remember we used to have ducks.
Yep.
And ducks are weird, and they're stinky, and they're gross.
And greasy.
Ugh. And we were butchering all the drakes because we had way too many of them. And it was just the ratio between drakes and hens it was too much for the hens. So we had to butcher all these drakes. And I remember, I literally lost my Cheerios. I had breakfast, and then Carly's like, yeah, I'm set up outside. Come give us a hand. And I'm like, okay, I'm part of the farm. Let's go do this. And so Carly gets the first one on the block, does it. And I'm like, I'm out.
I'm not really sure how I feel about this.
I'm like, I'm out. I can't.
Mm-hmm.
I'll grab them, and I'll start defeathering them. But I'm out for that specific phase of the butchering process. And she's like, are you serious right now? And I remember my daughter, she was probably only 7 at the time. She's like, Daddy, you're looking a little green. I'm like, no, seriously, I'm out. And my wife's kind of called me a bit of a wuss. It is what it is. I have a mental block about it.
That's fine.
And it is what it is. But and I think that's me still having a heart for the animal.
What's so
while
fun,
being still a hunter.
So you said it was a couple years ago now, and you're telling the story, and I can see your body language and everything about you. It's
I just get cringy, man.
What's happening, and it's not even happening right now. Just telling the story.
I'm just replaying in my mind. I'm like, no, but I'm out, bro. Don't ask me. I'll help with the process, but just not that part of the process.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's funny though, because when we shot the turkeys, it was no problem.
No.
Not no problem.
It was so fun.
Yeah, it was.
Because I had a failed turkey hunt this spring, so it was kind of it wasn't full redemption because it wasn't actually wild turkey. But I give them credit because turkeys are also quite a bit tougher than you give them credit for as well.
Oh, I'm at for sure.
Blasting them at 20 yards with a shotgun on full choke, they took a minute.
They did, yeah.
Like it was like,
Yeah, like
you
it was
know,
over. But
oh
yeah,
yeah,
no, for sure.
like, but they have really thick, heavy necks,
Hmm.
and like they're a tough bird.
Yeah,
Pun intended. There's a pun somewhere in there, I
that's
think.
cool. Somebody find it.
Because it's like a saying, isn't
Yeah.
it? No, man, that's a tough bird, right? It's like a saying.
If it
It's
isn't,
like a
it
tough
is
old
now.
bird.
Yeah, okay.
You know,
Yeah, I get
like,
behind that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. You're looking at me like I don't know what you're talking about, but I'm gonna run with
Play
it.
it cool, bro. Everybody cool. Yeah, they probably
Okay.
noticed.
But I think, well, I think this was just such a refreshing. This was one of my favorite podcasts because I think, we often talk about prepping for the hunt and field dressing or hunting stories and whatever, but I think sharing your story specifically coming from kind of like a non-hunting background, getting into hunting experience, what you did, and coming to terms with the process of it,
Yeah.
and I know you haven't kind of like got your hands in there yet type of thing, and it'll happen, but um, I think you're mentally ready for it. Like you have such a great approach to it
Hmm.
that I think that a lot of the listeners will be really encouraged by it, and it's really refreshing.
Hmm.
It's really refreshing. Because me being as a hunter, if I was listening, I'd be like, oh, finally a bridging in the gap. That's just kind of where I feel that this whole chat has gone is a bridging of the gap.
So that's the biggest thing. I think if I could give any advice to somebody where I was 6-8 months ago,
Yeah.
is finding somebody that has that's been there.
Yeah.
That has the confidence that can, because you feed off of their confidence, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think that it would have been nearly as enjoyable if I didn't have somebody that definitely knew what they were doing. Like, it's
Well,
not their first rodeo, and that's super reassuring because you know
Yeah.
that when you do take down that animal, you're not guessing.
That's right.
You have guidance.
Well,
and that
having a
was
hunting
helpful.
partner or / hunting mentor, is really important. I had a few growing up myself and things like that, and they get you not only just excited about the whole adventure and process, but it's teaching,
Mhm.
it's education, it's, oh, I didn't know that about the wind, or oh yeah, no, like I can see why you take your boots off and you stalk with your socks. Just like there's just little things like that, whether or not you choose to do them yourselves, but there's really cool things to be learned from hunting with different people.
Yeah.
Also on the same species, we're like, wow, my guy didn't do this and whatever, because we all have our own kind of hunting philosophies that have worked for us in the past, and kind of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it,
Mhm.
right? But and long story short, there's always things to be learned, but just always come in with an open mind. Don't get frustrated with the process. There's times of the process where it's frustrating for like a moment, or it's like, I could have done this, but learn from it.
Yeah.
Right. Don't take it as a negative. Take it as a positive for next time. Right. Because yeah, hunting is so far removed from just killing stuff. And the more people that we can educate about that specific point, it's about camaraderie, it's about being out in nature, it's about being in that animal's environment where you're at the disadvantage. Trust me, the animals are not at the disadvantage when you're hunting. They're
Yeah.
at the advantage, because an animal, especially a prey animal like deer, elk, moose, whatever, they always position themselves to have an escape route.
Yeah.
And where they feel comfortable.
Mhm.
So when you actually get to that point where you actually harvest an animal, you have done that in their kitchen where they have felt most comfortable with already a pre-planned escape route.
Yeah.
You're at the disadvantage. I don't care if you're a rifle hunter, a long-range shooter, a bow hunter, or a blow dart hunter. You are always at the disadvantage because you are in their house.
I think I should point out too that even though technically it wasn't a failed experience, of course, but from actually getting an animal,
Yeah.
I wasn't successful. That it hasn't like discouraged me at all. I think,
No,
you know what I mean? Like,
no.
I was worried that if I didn't get something, I wouldn't want to next year because I got this experience that wasn't.
Yeah.
It was everything good about hunting for me, with the exception of not getting an animal. Everything else about it did absolutely nothing but make me more excited for next year.
You will always not get something more than you get something with
For
hunting.
sure. Absolutely.
And that's why when you shift that mindset to being an outdoor enthusiast
Mhm.
who hunts, there's enough of a perspective shift
Mhm.
where you start picking up other things in nature while you're hunting, and it just makes the whole thing more enjoyable when you come back and if you're not with your wife and your wife's like, oh, how was it? You're like, man, like I learned this and I saw this and and instead of going, yeah, I didn't see anything tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Oh, well, why are you out there then?
yeah, exactly. It's like, no, I found this, I saw this, I learned this, and I tracked it, but I lost it, and this and that.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you're learning.
Yep.
And well, I just think this was awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for
Thank
having.
you.
I appreciate it.
This was a super fun, chill, reminisce, if you will,
Yeah,
talking chat.
for sure.
Talking chat. Yeah,
That's
it's the
cool.
same thing.
English is hard. I get it.
It's,
It is for me too.
yeah. Well, thanks for everybody who's watching. I hope you enjoyed it or listening. If you're listening, please subscribe. If you're watching, hit the subscribe button on the YouTube, because we're going to be pumping up more content like this with other special guests. And check out our Hunter Apprentice series. We actually, Jeremy and I just finished filming 5 videos yesterday that will be added to the Hunter Apprentice on some tidbits about outdoor survival stuff, what it takes to kind of get certified in BC, and some of the regulations in and around the synopsis, stuff like that. So definitely check that out. Yeah, I think that's it, man.
Yeah. Thanks again. I appreciate it.
Thank you. So again, thanks for watching, listening. Check us out on our social media channels as well. On Instagram, it's pursue_the_hunt. And then on Facebook, it's just @pursue_the_hunt. So check those out, because we do release some hunting tip videos through our good friend Muck Simons, who's out in Saskatchewan. He is a wealth of information as well. So, all right, we'll sign off for now, and we'll see you next time.
Sounds great.